we can move on to kind of how players are viewed, and I think it was Dreger who had this on Overdrive, and he said that fans kind of what players want to play in Toronto. That was kind of a narrative that's been around for a while now. But, I was looking at some of the interviews before the trade deadline, and it was Brandon Carlo, Nicholas Waugh, Scott Lawton, Bobby McMahon, all these guys saying that they want to play in Toronto. And I think that the narrative that Toronto isn't a good place to play, I understand the pressure, I understand all of that, but I think people are underestimating what it means to play in Toronto. I think that because the team has just lost so much, people are underestimating what it would be like if the Maple Leafs were to ever win. You look at Florida and the way that they've won their cups and they're celebrating and their parades. I promise you, Toronto will be 50 times bigger, 50 times more impactful. I think that people are underestimating the headlines of the Maple Leafs winning a Stanley Cup, what that would be. It's just something that I think for players and the media to kind of say that players don't want to play in Toronto. I think that if a player doesn't want to play in Toronto, then good for them. I mean, you don't want to win on the biggest stage. You don't want to have your last name remembered forever. You don't want to be a part of what would be one of the coolest things to ever happen in sports. The longest cup drought in hockey being over. If that's the way that players want to look at playing in Toronto and they just want to look at it as the negative and the media, imagine if you won. And I just think you look at some of the guys that have been here, and pretty much a lot of guys have said they love playing in Toronto. They love it here. It's a world-class organization. You're going to get the best health, the best nutrition, the best support. But if you can't block out the media, if you can't block out the pressure from the fans, then that's your own, that's your own issue. And, I just think if you were to kind of have the mindset of what if you flipped all that pressure, all that media coverage, all that pressure from the fans, and imagine what would that be like if you actually won. I think the players that understand that will get to reap the benefits if the Maple Leafs ever did win a Stanley Cup. So, that's just kind of my thoughts on that of players not wanting to play in Toronto. I think, you look at the Carlos and like Nicholas Waugh is a French Canadian. Like, why is he saying that he loves Toronto? And I know people are like, oh, well, you want them to say they don't want to play in Toronto? Like, no, not necessarily. But these guys are coming out and saying they love Toronto. So, it is what it is. Not every player is going to love Toronto. Obviously, we saw the Ryan O'Reilly situation and him not loving Toronto. So we'll see where it goes. But I don't think that it's really that big of a thing. I think players are fine with playing in Toronto. One thing too with the fans' pressure in Toronto is I think fans have a lack of trust in management. So many times it's so obvious that a player should be moved on and traded, and it feels like the fans need to create this whole movement against the player in order to get management's attention that, hey, you shouldn't bring this player back, or you should ask this player to move his no trade clause. It's like Morgan Rielly right now. Morgan Rielly is getting the hate that he is getting because the Maple Leafs organization gave him a no trade clause, and he's still here, and the reality is Morgan Rielly shouldn't be here anymore, and the Maple Leafs had to put so much pressure on management and on that player to get them to potentially move on from him. So there's a lack of trust within the organization and the fans, to where the fans feel the need to put so much pressure because they don't trust the organization to make the right moves. That's the way I look at it when I look at the way Mitch Marner was handled, the way Morgan Rielly was handled. It's like fans are like, we have to put pressure on this team, we have to put pressure on this player, or else they're never going to move on from each other. It seems like they're always so afraid to make a big move, to make a big splash, and the fans feel like they need to put so much pressure on management, on players, to potentially move on from each other, because it just feels like there's a lack of trust within the organization to make the right moves. And with the fans, that's just kind of the way that I would look at it there.